Everybody should have an agenda, I think, so we're going to trade off. I'm going to open, and then my colleague, the chair of the state board, will take over, and we'll go back and forth. But I want to give a very special thank you to the Scripps Research Institute for hosting this meeting. That this is the most fabulous facility, and I hope everybody has had a chance to take a tour. I spent some time here yesterday and met with a number of their people, and it is so impressive. And this is indicative of what we should be working towards, because this makes such a difference in our state. But thank you so much to Scripps and to to Richard Lerner and the others that have participated in putting this together. And I want to thank the Council of 100 for their support and encouragement in moving us together into this meeting of firsts. And I say plural because it's the first ever, but I hope that it's just the first in a series of collaborative meetings and protocols that we might move forward together on. I've got to welcome and thank T. Willard Fair, the esteemed chair of the State Board of Education, and all of his colleagues for wanting to participate and to work together with us, and Commissioner Smith and Chancellor Brogan and Chancellor Holcomb for all of the work that they put into putting this together. And we have a first-class facilitator over here with David Spence, and we're going to hear from him about a national perspective, and I think that's helpful. But I also want to thank Dean Colson, sitting in the front row over here, for his continued counsel and support to all of us in higher ed, and to Ed Moore with the independent colleges. I don't know where Ed is. There you are. He's behind the chancellor. For his participation and agreement to work collaboratively with all of us. So when I became the chair of the Board of Governors, one of my priorities was to try to develop a more collaborative working relationship with our friends that was then the college system and the community colleges, and now we have the state college system. So I'm very pleased that today we're having this meeting, and I hope, again, it's a long-term thing. Today we have an opportunity to engage in what I hope is robust discussion to enhance collaboration on a number of issues that are common to all of us. And just on the top of those lists, I'd have to say maintaining and strengthening our 2+2 articulation system with the community colleges, because that is a nationally recognized program that we want to keep, and we want to make it even better because it helps us in the production of baccalaureate degrees of high quality. The second is to develop a more formal type structure where the university system can participate with our K through 12 friends in doing what we can to better enhance the production of high school graduation rates. We need to do this. It is key to the overall impact of higher education, because we don't have enough of a pipeline now to even begin to meet the output that's necessary through the higher ed system. And then the third thing, and it's the topic of the day really, is to develop more collaboration with our state college system to be able to plan and develop the kinds of degrees that are going to be necessary for us to transition our economy. And I want to take just 1 minute and elaborate on that point, because this is kind of an automatic, I'm a wind-up toy on this subject, because I think that we all have recognized that higher education is the key to transitioning our economy to a knowledge-based, innovation-type economy. And examples of what we need to do are we have many of them in our system, but number one, of course, is the production of baccalaureate degrees so that we can increase the education level of our population. The second thing, though, is to be able to take the research mission of our research universities and to bolster that aspect of our university system and to develop partnerships and affiliations with nationally and internationally recognized research institutes like Scripps, like Max Planck, like Burnham, and many of the others that we have in this state, but we'd like to do more of that. And we need to take those research missions and make them into business development and job creators, because those kinds of jobs are high paid and they're the kind that we want for this state. So when we do that, we want our baccalaureate degree development to be able to supply graduates to those kinds of businesses. So I'm hopeful that, because when we did our report, the so-called Pappas report, we envisioned a state college system, and the legislature created one. So our goal is to work collaboratively with that college system to be able to plan for the degrees that we're going to need. And we'd like to do it on a voluntary basis. We'd like to develop that collaboration in a way that it's voluntary and therefore more productive. So we're ready, willing, and able to be accountable and to be efficient, because accountability is first and foremost to our success, not only with the legislature, but with our constituencies. So we just came from a Board of Governors meeting and passed the most comprehensive accountability program that the university system's ever had. And so we're happy to have had the opportunity to do it here at this meeting. And so I'm hoping that as we leave here, we will be able to have a discussion along the lines of collaboration, and we'll be able to leave directing our staff to work up some protocols and processes that we can follow going forward. So I thank you again very much for this opportunity. I'm a good worker and I listen well, so I'll be listening and talking as we move ahead. And I want to turn this over now to my colleague, T. Willard Fair, Chair of the State Board of Education.
Thank you very much, Sheila, and good morning, everybody. Part of the preparation for me today was to get some talking points from the Commissioner and from Lynn Abbott. As I listened to Sheila make her presentation, I think somebody gave her my talking points. Because the things that she outlined, collaboration, accountability, efficiency, a great board meeting that they had, a great board meeting that we just had. It sounds like before we start the conversation, we're already on the same page about things that are important to the children in the state of Florida. So Sheila stole the portion of my presentation where I was supposed to thank Scripps, introduce some people, and that's been done. So let me talk about what I think is really important for us as we come to the end of this process. We at the State Board are absolutely certain that this is a great historical meeting for us. It is the first time that two sets of very important volunteers who have the awesome responsibility of setting the policy and executing those projects that are important for the development and the education of the children in the state of Florida. And we do that well. What we have not done, Frank Brogan, is had the nerve or the intelligence to sit down and face-to-face, first of all, understand all of the things that each of us does. Because you're going to learn today that there's some things about the State Board of Education that you thought you knew. And some of the things that you thought you knew, you're going to find out that you don't know. We want to correct that today as we go forward. I certainly have absolutely no real understanding about how the Board of Governors function. And I admit that publicly, and that should not be a public admission because we are supposed to be working together to make things happen. So today, we sit down in a historic venue to talk for the first time to each other, not at each other, about what we can do. I would hope that when we get to the conversation, that we spend no time trying to critique what we did not do correctly at the State Board. And I assure you that my colleagues will spend no time trying to critique what you did or did not do correctly at the Board of Governors. But I would hope that we would lay aside any personal concerns, any personal prejudices, anything that we think that we know that we know that we don't know, and try to find out what we really need to know in this whole process. The most important piece of this agenda today is not the introductions. It's not the comments that are going to be made by the staff members, for they simply will give us the information that we need in order to have a discussion. The most important piece is when we come to the conversation about where do we go from here. As we say in the old Baptist church, what happens at the benediction, that's important. So I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. I want to introduce everybody who should be introduced. Those that I did not introduce, Sheila did. And let me say to you that this is historic in its nature, and I hope that we all understand that what we're doing is not about us, but it's about the future of the children in the state of Florida. I'm supposed to pass the mic to John Pritchard, the
Yes.
interim president. Okay, all right. You're the interim president of Florida Atlantic University? John?
Is this on? Thanks so much, Mr. Fair. And on behalf of Florida Atlantic University, I'd like to welcome you to the MacArthur campus here. This campus is currently celebrating its 10th birthday. And I imagine if you went back 10 years and looked at it, what it was then, what it is now, you wouldn't even recognize it. This campus, as far as Florida Atlantic University is concerned, houses many of our upper division programs to serve students in this area. It is also the home of our Wilkes Honors College, which is a very unique residential college that is completely self-contained on this campus. Another thing that makes this campus so absolutely unique and wonderful is the presence of Scripps. Governor McDevitt indicated the relationship between Scripps and universities as far as promoting research programs. And I can assure you that this campus is becoming a research hub of Florida Atlantic University, due in large part to the wonderful relationship that we have with Scripps, Florida. So again, welcome, and at this point I'd like to call forward Harry Orff, who is Vice President for Scripps Scientific Operations. Harry.
Thank you, John. I'm going to come out here so we don't have so many backs to be turned. My role here this morning is simply to welcome all of you. We had the privilege of welcoming the Florida Council of 100 earlier this morning, and we actually made them sit through a little presentation that we gave about the overview of what Scripps is, and then we also got up on our soapbox about the importance of education in the state of Florida. We are, after all, a consumer of your educational product, and we therefore feel very strongly about the importance of education from K-12 all the way up through graduate school. And most of you now know that Scripps, of course, does offer graduate degrees in both chemistry and biology in that context. But more than just welcoming you, I really wanted to come here this morning to thank publicly, first of all, the state of Florida for the encouragement and the investment that they've made in Scripps, to personally thank Frank Brogan from FAU and the entire Florida Atlantic University staff. They could not have been more welcoming and more supportive at a time when we got here and established ourselves on the ground. It really had no friends, no infrastructure. They provided it all, and they guided us along the path, gave us the support, and allowed us to finally walk on our own in the campus that we have here today. I also want to thank the researchers across the state, all of the universities. When Scripps was announced to come here, there was a backdoor discussion that the universities are going to have a problem with this. Why should these resources be going to an outside entity that's coming here? Why shouldn't we just put those resources into our state universities? The research community, since we have been here on the ground across the state, could not be more supportive. It's interesting when you get good scientists together and they start talking, somehow the politics all fades away. And that's what's happened. We have been welcomed here not just by FAU, but by the entire state. We have worked to integrate ourselves and to share the technologies that we've been afforded by the state with the researchers throughout the state. And I will leave you, I will leave you with this one fact, which we shared this morning with the Florida Council of 100. As of our July 1 report, and we do this every year to the funding corp, we have established over 30 peer-to-peer collaborations with researchers throughout the state, at least a few with every major research university in the state of Florida. And again, we thank you and we welcome you, and we look forward to an exciting dialogue.
I would be remiss if I did not take 1 second here and introduce some of our presidents who happen to be here in the audience. Bernie Machen, President of University of Florida, please stand. John Delaney, President of University of North Florida. I know Judy Ginshaft, I saw her in the room somewhere. She's on a tour. Okay, well, she is here. Of course, you met John Pritchett, FAU. I see Wilson Bradshaw from Florida Gulf Coast University. Is there anyone I missed? I see some board chairs too. Nancy Blosser from FAU just walked in the door. Rhea Law was here, University of South Florida. I see Carlos Alfonso from University of Florida. Manny Fernandez, who used to be University of Florida. Dick Beard next to him used to be University of South Florida. Is there anybody I missed? Bill Jennings. Yes, Florida A&M University chair. Okay, thank you all for coming to this. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much for those introductions. One of the things that I've instructed the commissioner to do in his comments is to make sure that he introduces the proper people on our team. I told him make sure that he does not miss anybody. That's the problem when you introduce people without a script, that you miss somebody and then somebody takes that personally. So if somebody's missed, put it on the commissioner, not on the chairman of the State Board of Education. He's going to do that. Gives him a chance now
Marshall
to get
Price. They're already telling me what I did wrong. I'm sorry.
Somebody else?
Somebody else. Well, somebody's supposed to tell me.
So Lynn, get the commissioner list to make sure that we do not miss anybody at this point.
I think we have some presidents of the state colleges here.
Probably
we
do.
gonna
I see one back there.
Well, where are they? Stand up. Ed, yes, Ed Massey.
Yeah.
Daytona Beach.
Yeah.
Yeah, yay. Okay, thank
Everybody's
you.
here.
I know Palm Beach, but now you're somebody else.
Yes, everybody's been.
Superintendent's here. Right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
I'll shut up.
Next item on the agenda is a national perspective on education. Just left a conference in Washington, D.C. Several weeks ago, presented by Jeb on educational excellence. And we had presenters from Australia, the United Kingdom, other parts of Europe, talking about what they are doing, but most importantly, comparing what they are doing with what we've already done. A great opportunity for us to say to the world that Florida understands the globalization of this issue. We thought this morning that part of the landscape ought to be for us to really understand the national perspective on this issue of education, accountability, etc. No better person to do that for us than David Spence, who comes to us with all of the necessary credentials to give us at least the impression that he knows what he's talking about. We vetted him out, and we believe that he is indeed a national expert, and everything that we hear him say, we can expertly believe that it is correct. And those things that are not correct, Frank Brogan will correct you before we leave at this point. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you David Spence, President, Southern Regional Educational Board.
Is this one working? I guess it is. Thank God. Good morning, and I am so pleased to be here, back in my second home, I like to say. I've been, it's been suggested by, I guess it was you, Will. First of all, let me say Chair McDevitt and Chair Fair and Frank and Eric and Susan and everybody. It really is good to be here. And this truly is a historic meeting. I could tell you a lot of stories. I first came to Florida in 1980 when I was 10 years old. And I can remember a couple of other experiences attempting these kinds of joint meetings. This is truly an historic occasion. I'm not going to take too long. You'll thank me for that. I don't know if I'm an expert. I've tried awful hard on particularly one of these issues I'm going to talk about and challenge your interest and commitment. But Will suggested, Will I've known forever, that I make sure people know how much Florida means to me. I mentioned I came here for the first time in 1980 to chair what we called then the Post-Secondary Education Planning Commission, whose charge was to develop the first master plan for Florida post-secondary education, and then came back in 94 to 98. Carolyn remembers this, and John Moyle and others, as the Chief Academic Officer and Executive Vice Chancellor for the state university system. And there are an awful lot of people in this room, and I include you, Frank, that have been awful good to me and have helped me over many, many years, and I appreciate that. My grandparents from Schenectady, New York, were some of the first settlers in Kissimmee. I can remember as a kid cowboys in Kissimmee, and I can remember it like it was yesterday. And I think I remember a cattle drive, too, if I'm not mistaken. I assume you don't do that anymore. My parents retired in Gainesville. My mother still lives there. My son went to the University of Central Florida. I'm glad he did. And I met my wife in Florida. So those are my bona fides. Anyway, it means an awful lot to me, this wonderful state, and I'm glad to be here. What I've been asked to talk about is the importance, really, I think the imperative and the urgency of states increasing the numbers and percentage of students getting post-secondary certificates. I include certificates in degrees, associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, and higher. That's one thing, and I've got some data here, and we can spend 2 minutes on that. You have it, you can take it. I think it's pretty good data. But what I really want to get into is what it's going to take for every state, and every state's in this boat, to significantly increase the numbers and percentages of students, high school graduates, actually earning something. actually getting a piece of paper, whether it's a certificate, associate degree, or bachelor's degree, or higher. And finally, and this is what I want to spend most of the time on, is the idea that it is going to take unprecedented work and relationships between pre-K-12 and post-secondary education to pull this off. We have talked in this country about PK-20, P-16, all this stuff, and I can tell you across this nation that it is a concept that is long on structure and process and woefully short on results and outcomes, okay? And this state now has a chance to really put some meaning into an agenda, and I want to talk about that. The data. What this data tells you, you've got a handout here, is that you are in the middle of the pack with respect to the nation in terms of associate degree and baccalaureate degree production. On page 2, you'll see a chart that compares per capita income in your population to bachelor degree attainment, and you're going to see a very strong correlation across the 50 states. The states that have a high per capita income have a high bachelor's degree attainment. Very few states fall outside of that. This is a very strong correlation, and you can see where Florida is. It's right in the middle of the 50 states in terms of little higher on per capita income than average, right in the middle in terms of adults with bachelor's degrees. Another person who was very, very good to me in my early career was a former Speaker of the House and Commissioner, Ralph Turlington. And I've never forgotten something he told me was, nobody likes fairly fresh fish. Nobody likes to be average, okay? And all of these charts, whether you, I know everybody's writing it down, it's a wonderful.
I'm going to hear it a lot.
Very vivid. And the rest of these, I'm not going to spend time, the rest of these charts essentially say that whether it's associate degree and higher or bachelor's degree and higher, you're a little bit right, you're almost right at the national average, okay? Compared to other countries, we're still good compared to other countries, particularly in bachelor's degree and higher. We're not as good when we count associate degrees plus bachelor's degrees. That's because we expect a lot of our community colleges to do other things than just produce degrees, okay? I think that's got to change, okay? I think we have to expect all of our higher education institutions to get students. Retention's fine, but we need completion, okay? So that's another point. But you'll see all these charts say, now where the cause for concern on this whole international deal, and you can't go to a meeting, Chairman Fair, you heard this and what, I'm sure, we're falling behind all these countries. Where we're falling behind is when we look at our younger populations, the 18 to 30-year-olds, we are falling behind like 10 or 11 of the OECD developed countries in terms of degree production, okay? We're living off, you know, our 25 to 60, our 34 to 64-year-olds, okay? Now that is true. We've got, so there's a lot of reasons that we have to kick it up, not just because we don't want to be fairly fresh fish. Florida wants to be, I'm sure, first, top 10, first, top 5, whatever it is. Page 9, brief comment about this. Florida is the only state, there's a lot of good things about Florida. Florida has a wonderful data system, okay, compared to other states. And this chart on page 9 actually shows you what happened to all these high school graduates that graduated in 1995-96. All right, there were about 90,000 of them. 61% of these graduates went on to some form of post-secondary education during that time. Yes, post-secondary education. 39% didn't enter any over this period. And then on the right-hand column, you see the completion. All right? And what you see there is that, I'm not sure you can exactly get it from here, is that only 40, when you put these two together cumulatively, I'll tell you what it is, only 49% of the students completed something, whether it was a post-secondary certificate, diploma, associate degree, career or transfer, and BA. 49%. Now, I have reason to believe that's higher probably than most of the states in this country. You do pretty darn well in terms, relatively, in terms of getting students something, okay? But just think of this, you know, half full or half empty. 50% of the students go away with nothing. And think of the state subsidy. Think of the institutional subsidy. Think of the money and the time of the students. Okay, so this, to me, is a very powerful chart. And finally, I want to brag just for a second on Florida. You see, this is a good table. Page 10. This comes from Quality Counts Education Week, which is a good weekly education newspaper, national. They do a study every year. On the left-hand column is the chance for a student who's born in Florida to actually get some kind of degree or certificate post-secondary. You rank 33rd right now. But the point here is, that I want to make, is that there is almost a perfect correlation between the first three rows, family income, parent income, and parental employment. You just line up these states in terms of those three variables, and you will have almost a perfect, you can predict almost to the state whose students, whose residents are actually going to get a degree or certificate. Okay. Education is the vehicle for breaking into that cycle. Okay? And through education, raising the per capita income and then restarting the cycle. And the good news is on the left column, your achievement. You know, how well are you doing to prepare students better? You rank 7th in the nation. All right? You know, God help the state when this is reversed. All right? And we always look for this. And the big reasons here for your high rank out of the 50 states is the achievement gains you've made over the last 4 years, 4 to 6 years. Look at, you're 5th in the states in making gains in 4th grade math. All right, 4th in 8th grade reading. You're 6th in reducing the achievement gap in reading across populations. 5th, look at you're 2nd in the nation in improving grad rates, high school graduation rate. That's what, this is good. All right, I don't have to tell you. And before I go on to the last part, what I wanted to say is that I know we're going to hear some presentations, but I just got to tick off some things. Florida is one of the few, we study this at SREB, Florida is one of the few states whose standards, even now, the standards compare favorably with NAEP. Okay, we got a lot of states in this nation, about half of them, whose standards on their state tests are lower than NAEP. Okay, yours are there. You've increased your NAEP performance also. Achievement gaps are narrowing. The FCAP, IBAP. I assume you're going to mention this, Eric. I mean, you're a leader in that. You're moving into a lot of the new accountability program. And finally, because I'm not going to talk about this, you have the best community colleges and the best transfer system in the nation. All right? I spend a lot of my time going to our 15 other states, begging them, working with the legislatures to pass the Florida legislation, and we did it this spring in Louisiana. Okay? We did it, John, in California, because this legislation, it's been an accretion over many years, culminating in the 95 legislation. Okay? It is the best transfer system in the nation, bar none. Okay? And it's a wonderful thing to build on. So those are some of the great thing. Let me just say, I want to spend the rest of my time, I know I don't have long, to talk about one action that we have to take, and it's a big one, to improve post-secondary degree and certificate attainment. We got to do a lot of things. Graduate more kids. Interest more kids when they're in high school to go to college. Make it affordable. We got to do all these things. And once they get there, make sure they complete. But I want to talk now about something at the interface between K-12 and post-secondary. All right. What is it going to take to get more kids actually ready to succeed in college? We know that readiness, and by readiness I define it as, sure, taking the right courses. You got to do that. We all assume that. You got to do that. All right? I'm talking about developing the reading comprehension, the writing skills, and the mathematical reasoning skills. Not the formulas and all that, but the mathematical abstract reasoning skills that means that you can succeed in higher level work. These are the key things. This is where states are falling down. What's it going to take for higher ed, post-secondary, working with the public schools to do this? I have to say this. Every state is underestimating the extent of this readiness problem. I will throw a figure out there that if you have decent readiness standards, which means that if you're reading, if you show that a student is reading, writing, and doing math at a certain level, according to a certain accepted test, all right, that if you have this, and you come within a 90% chance of predicting that student's going to succeed in first-year work, all right, in college or university, if you apply those kinds of standards statewide to all entering freshmen, there's not a state in this nation where 70% of the students are not ready. Okay? We're dealing, I mean, every state says it. Oh, it's about 60%. In the community college, 70%. And it's about 20 or 30% in regional universities. Look, I'm not worried about our research universities. If you got SATs of 1,300 and 1,400, you know, you're probably reading, writing, and doing that stuff. I'm talking about where 80% of the students go. Community colleges and the smaller, less selective universities. And ACT has proved it. When we were out in California, we had one readiness test and set of standards for all 50,000 of our freshmen that came in our 23 campuses at Cal State University. They were good standards, the highest in the nation, and 70% needed help in reading, math, or both. And by the way, reading is the major problem. If you can't read with comprehension, you can't do math, you can't do science, you can't do chemistry, you can't do these other things. Now, that's what we found. And that's one of the agenda. On page 4 through, I don't know, 6 or 7, we set out here 7 steps. And you have this, no, I'm sorry, that's mine. It's the last 2 pages, pages 11, last 2 pages of your handout. These are steps, 7 steps. 7 steps in a statewide college readiness agenda. All right? And we've developed these other agencies and organizations like Achieve ADP, which Florida works with. We're working with 6 or 7 states. We've been funded by the Gates Foundation to do these 7 steps for a state, okay? To work with the state in doing this. We think that every one of these steps is essential. And if you don't do every one, it's not going to work. It needs to be systemic. But you can see. Let me just mention them briefly. First, statewide college readiness standard. Higher post-secondary education and K-12. All schools, all colleges need to get together and agree on one set of reading, writing, and math standards that everybody accepts and fully understands. And everybody applies. There's one set, all right? They got to be your own. They shouldn't be SATs or ACTs. If you're going to do that, then you adopt the SAT, ACTs as your state board standards and your post-secondary. They got to be the exact standards, okay? Everybody agrees on it, okay? No states do that right now. 2, you've got to have some kind of testing in high school, we like the junior year, that tests all students on these standards. Where are you at the end of your junior year? Students would have been exposed to all this stuff by then. Are you ready to go to college? Then go now. If you're not, get some help in that senior year. But again, right around these standards. All right, reading, writing, and math. 3, school curriculum. Take these standards, map them back to the 8th grade, make sure they're there with priority in all the courses, from 8th to 12th grade. And for the students who are assessed as not quite ready, make sure you have special courses for them around these standards in the 12th grade. 4th, teacher development. All right? Once you have these standards, the job and the challenge is, and this is the most important part of it, is to make sure every high school teacher in this state knows, feels, understands, embraces these standards. Okay? That is a significant professional development job. But it's doable because it's around these standards. It's not everything. Okay? It's around these standards. Pre-service education needs to have these standards. And then 5 and 6 are the accountability. Schools need to be held accountable for increasing the percentages of students who meet these standards. Simple. And I believe, Eric and Francis, you're moving in that direction if you're not already there. Okay? All right, that's very, very significant. And Frank, my career, 30 years in higher education, I've been part of the problem. I have. Okay? We've never expected our universities to actually expect students to complete something. All right? And I personally believe after 8 years in this issue that until we hold universities responsible for completion, when we do, that will get that undivided attention on working with the public schools to make sure students are ready. Because not being ready is the big reason why students don't complete. Okay? So, now, finally, I'm ending, Chair Fair, Chair McDevitt, with some concrete stuff, okay, on a couple of these issues. Here are some of the things you're going to have to deal with when you get into this agenda. And this is a concrete agenda that will show that the state of Florida is serious, dead serious, about this, something we call seamless, all right? Doesn't have meaning now. This is what it's going to take to make this relationship seamless. Under standards. 1, I'm going to be a little opinionated here. It's based on experience, but could be wrong. 1, on standard, focus on these learning skills. Focus on reading, writing, and math. Yeah, make sure all students take the right courses. You got to have Algebra 1, Algebra 2, 4 years of English. That goes without saying. But the skills, the learning skills are the problem. The reading, writing, and math. So focus on those. 2, we got the national standards conversation going on. We have all this stuff, all right? But what's going to come out of this, and I know because of his background, and he probably won't say it, the commission understands this. What we're going to have in another 2 months are a set of very general, something called content standards. And there's going to be a higher degree of alignment across states, okay? Because they're written at such a high, vague level, okay? They are not helpful to teachers, okay? And I've said this in the other places too. What's helpful to teachers is them to understand what kind of performance is expected. Performance on a standard is the key thing, not just what it says, all right? And think of Olympic diving. I don't know a thing about it, but I know in terms of scoring it, you've got what? Okay, it's a kind of dive. And then 2, it's a level of difficulty, all right? All right? And then 3, it's how well the person performs. And that's what it takes to get teachers to understand what a standard is. It's got to be joint. It's got to get higher ed people with the K-12 people. It's a personal thing. They got to talk to each other. They got to look at student work, and they got to come to the point where they actually know what performance is and grade the things in the same way. Okay, this is very, very intense work, and that's why these things don't get done. Last point on standards: make sure they're the exact standards that you share. Make sure they're the exact. They're not aligned. They're slightly different in higher ed and slightly. Make sure they're the exact same standard. In terms of testing, Florida's making a good first few steps on this. One is we're a very big believer in end-of-course testing. It's closer to the student. It's closer to the state. It's closer to the curriculum. It's closer to the student. and you're moving in that direction. The challenge is going to be to make sure you get end-of-course testing that rises to the level of these college readiness standards. And when you do, and a lot of states are using English 3 and Algebra 2, when you do, please do these things. When it comes time to set a qualifying score for what it means to be ready in English 3 for college or Algebra 2 for college, whatever it is, make sure you set a score that truly means that that student is ready to begin college the next day. States don't do this. All right, they fudge. They say, they do. We can't afford to have, 70% not do it and all that. Make sure you set a true score and validate it by comparing those students who get these scores, how they do in first-year work. And if it doesn't come to within 90% predictability, raise it, okay? A corollary to that. If you use these tests for high school graduation, high stakes, that readiness score has got to be much higher at this point than the passing score. All right? There's not a state in this nation that is within 10 to 12 years of having these scores converge. All right? You just got to face it. And we've got state after state that are now facing that and saying, yeah. But hold the schools accountable for increasing the percentages of the students that meet the higher standard. The accountability is still. So recognize that gap. And then these others kind of flow. To me, the big stretch and the big push on this comes with teacher development around these standards and the adjustment of career. This is what's going to take the time, and the resources. But it all will fail unless you start with these standards. So I'm done, probably really done with you, but I wanted to give you an idea of what we think in terms of concrete actions, what needs to be taken in order to make this general rhetoric about pre-20, pre-16, seamless articulation, all this stuff, truly have meaning in terms of one very important issue, and that is improving the readiness of high school graduates for college.
Any questions to David? Yes.
Looking at that chart, the 49% is 49% of the 61%, so it's not 49% of the overall students on chart 9, right?
Oh, you're talking about the completion chart?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, because you were saying it was 49% and you sort of...
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes, absolutely. Of the students who went,
right,
actually went there. Yeah, that's
So
correct.
it's a much smaller number.
so it's a much smaller number.
That's correct.
Exactly. That's all I wanted to
I
thank you.
thought it looks pretty high.
Any other questions to David? Mr. Expert, thank you. Want to make some...
While we're taking a minute here, I want to recognize Representative Will Weatherford, who came in during that presentation. We are very fortunate to have him with us because he is the chair of the House Education Council, which oversees all of the education policy committees in the House. So thank you very much for coming, Representative Weatherford, and we're honored to have you here.
Thank you, Sheila. David gave us an overview of the nation and the world. He sort of compared where we might be at some times to fresh fish. And I saw Frank Brogan write it down, so rest assured, David, you will hear that about 20 more times. And Frank and I would give you credit for it at this point. We used to be real bad in the state of Florida when it came to educational standards. Then we got better. But as you look at the charts, we still got a long way to go. The challenge is there. The blueprint that David laid out for us is one that we can pursue as we think about refining our roles and as we think about what we have to do differently in order to be where we want to be in comparison not only to the other states, but to the world. But before we get to that kind of elaborate course of action, it's important that we all fully have an understanding as to where we are right now. And the presenters at this moment are going to share with us where we are in our various silos, where's the State Board or the Board of Governors. Eric Smith, who is the Commissioner of Education, is going to lead off, to be followed by my good friend Frank Brogan, and then the lady from the Council of 100 is going to close it out. Eric.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've been given a couple of tasks as this meeting unfolded, so I'll do my best to do duty to that. We certainly have our board members here, and I say that in a very important way, that we do make decisions jointly and collaboratively. We did have a very successful, I think, board meeting this week on a strategic plan that speaks to much of this work, and in great detail, with lines of accountability on each one that this board will expect us to deliver on. And so to the board members as part of this larger team at the department. We also have some key members of my staff, our staff, the state's staff, Dr. Frances Haythcock, who is Chancellor for pre-K through 12. She'll kick me from behind the chair. Pre-kindergarten through 12th grade, and is hands down, and I'll tell you, if you go to national meetings among K-12 educators, Dr. Haythcock is one of the nation's leaders, and has pushed hard on work here in Florida in the last 2 years. We have Dr. Will Holcomb, who leads the Florida State College system very ably, and has worked to build what is considered to be truly one of the finest state college systems in the country, and reviewed that way by outside evaluation repeatedly year after year after year, and is one of the great jewels of this state, and great economic drivers of this state. But Dr. Will Holcomb, we have Loretta Costa with us, who is, yes, if they could. If you can't, well, I don't know if that's possible or not, Ms. Taylor. There's no workman's comp. We don't have the money for it. Dr. Frances Haythcock, and Will Holcomb, and Loretta Costa. And this really is a phenomenal team. Loretta is in charge of all of our career academies and workforce preparation, our technical centers, and provides just an absolutely vital role, which I'll speak about in a second. We also have with us, and again, my back is to the audience, so I might, Mr. Chairman, forgive me if I miss somebody. We have I've been a superintendent of schools for 17 years in my career. I think we have, so I evaluate my peers and colleagues. We have what I consider to be two of the very best superintendents in the nation that are part of the Council of 100. They work with the council. And either they're here in the auditorium or they're touring Scripps, but Bill Vogel from Seminole County and Mary Ellen Elia from Hillsborough, they both fight a good fight, argue a good argument, and most importantly, deliver well for the children they serve. And very proud of them and 65 other superintendents in our great state. So where is Florida right now in relationship to some of the comments that Dave Spence has made? Again, I'm a relative newcomer, still 2 years on the job as commissioner, and I do feel that Florida over the last decade has made incredible progress by the dedication, the sweat, and the toil of educators such as Bill and Mary Ellen, and the classroom teachers that step up to new policies that kind of roll down from Mount Tallahassee as if it's an ever-ending flood coming their way. But they get the job done. They get the job done. And over the last decade, this state, the professional educators in the state, have stepped up to the expectation of leadership in the state to deliver in a way that has outpaced the performance of the nation. And I speak to that in a couple of ways. One is the National Assessment of Educational Progress Report that measures our performance in both math and reading in 4th and 8th grade and is a true and valid measure. Back in the late 1990s, we generally performed somewhere in the lower third of the nation in state performance on NAEP. Now, generally, we perform in the top third on reading and math performance in 4th and 8th grade. And in our performance with minority students, African American and Hispanic Latino, has outstripped the gains in performance and the reduction of the gap in performance of other states around the country. So our work and the focus of our work has paid off in the lives of children. As I look at the performance on what I call the upper edge, the college readiness piece, in 2002, 2003, we had 34.3% of our high school students upon graduation that had participated in at least one, what we call an accelerated course, advanced placement, international baccalaureate, dual enrollment, or an ACE program, another international program of high quality. 34% back in 2002, 2003. Our children, your children, the children we're here talking about today, in 2007, 2008, was right at 51%, a 16% increase in a relatively short period of time, a trajectory which tells me as commissioner what our children expect for themselves. And I think part of this discussion about, as our mission statement says, the seamless program for children, it is about what we expect of our young people. Do we expect that the children of Florida, children of poverty and affluence, children of racial backgrounds and so forth, are they all capable of entering the doors of our universities and our state colleges prepared, ready to do something and contribute to the state's economy and contribute to their families, ultimately their families' prosperity and life? We are making gains in that in Florida because of the decisions and the state policies that have been supported by the business community and delivered by elected officials in Florida. We are moving aggressively forward on that agenda. It is not an agenda that is complete. We have just recently adopted what we call next generation standards, and Dave Spence talked about the importance of standards. We anticipate that when we have our new standards in place, that they will be greeted with great rounds of cheer and excitement by the universities in the state of Florida, University of Florida and FSU and UCF and all the rest of the great institutions, because at last the K-12 program is trying to measure up our preparation with their need for the ability to perform and produce. That's what we expect with the next generation standards, and they are dramatically higher. They are very tightly aligned to NAEP. And the work continues. You will hear about the Common Core, another national effort to further improve standards, but it is about standards. Standards, is, if done correctly, is what the messaging we give to the classroom teacher, what work we expect to be done, and what level of performance we have for our children. I have a good friend, I believe, a good friend in the business community. I won't share his name, most of you, but that always, he haunts me every time I see him. He says, is the world going to be ready for my third grader? And I always take a pause. I know I'm not quite certain if we are doing all we should and could do for his third grader. I think we should and could and must do more. But that is the question. They don't see a two-siloed system. That third grader has an expectation on life that they have to fulfill.
What's the timing of the next generation standards? Just give the audience the context of when they'll be.
Next generation standards have been complete. The assessments for those, and this is what Dave Spence said, the importance is how we drill that down into real work. The performance, the assessments tied to those will be delivered to our children on the next round, the FCAT test in 2011, 1 year from this spring. The tests are being prepared. There will be some piloting this spring, but this will be the last year for the old standards. Next fall, day one of class, every child that walks into a classroom, kindergarten through 12th grade, will be expected to perform at a much higher level. Teachers will be expected to teach at a much higher level. And so the progress on this continues. We still have, we have the good fortune, and I saw Senator Don Gates last evening, his leadership and the leadership of the legislature and the governor in passing the high school accountability bill is landmark. Perhaps one of the single most best pieces of legislation I've seen in my career that requires our high schools to step up and be evaluated in terms of what we all expect them to do, not just the foundational work of FCAT, but the work of workforce preparation and college preparation as measured by AP and IB and so forth and so on. So we have a structure that's being formulated and being put into place at great effort by our districts and our classroom teachers. But the movement is that way. Our governor recently signed our participation in the America Diploma Project, and again is another effort to align us with post-secondary. The disconnect continues, however, and part of the challenge is that the disconnect continues. You can graduate from high school according to state policy and statute. You can graduate from high school in Florida successfully, and the first course you will take in post-secondary will be a course of remediation at a community college. That all that is required is Algebra 1 and a 2, a point below proficiency on the FCAT, and certain coursework, but it is not a requirement for graduation that leads to successful entry into the community college without remediation. We have to be concerned about our graduation requirements in the state of Florida. We have to be concerned about the quality of courses by developing end-of-course exams and so forth. Our work at the, and again, I said 5 minutes, I'm 7 already. Frank's kicked me 3 times, but great working with Frank Brogan.
I don't think so.
But don't put me next to him next time. But Frank, I know I'm going to go 20, so this meeting's over right now and adjourned.
Remember, if you take 8, he won't say it all.
He's keeping track. There's an accountability. If I have some guru that can do a PowerPoint, I have 3 slides that I think make some very important points about our state college system. Again, a state college system that is so important in all aspects of the economic success of the state. It is the certificates, it is the technical training, it is the AA training, it is a transfer training, it is the baccalaureate training that all rolls into all the needs of business in Florida to respond regionally, locally, as well as a statewide vision and strategy. What's happening to our graduates? This is our version of Dave Spence's slide. And I hope I have the right slide up first here. But the first you can see where we rank a bit with the SREB average and where Florida ranks in terms of 3-year graduation rate for students coming from our Florida college system. And we do a good job in production with our college system. That is important. Just from a cost standpoint, compared to other states, we do a good job. The next slide, and I'm going to turn this over to Frank. The next slide is an important. What happens to our graduates after they leave us from our high schools? 2006, 2007, 141,000 graduates, as you can see. Of those, 58% go on to the Florida college system. 58%, 31% go into the state university system, 8% out of state, 5% independent universities, and so forth. The next slide is equally important because of whether we want to make it seamless. It is seamless in the eyes of that 3rd grade child and the children we serve, the young adults we serve in our colleges, in our universities, and in our high schools. It is seamless to them. It might be a very complex, difficult to maneuver seamless system, but they have dreams in mind. You can see where the transfer occurs out of our state colleges with the majority of our high school graduates going into Florida colleges. It is a critical place of building this pipeline of future leaders and workers in this state. You can see the percentages on AA transfers to our state university system is a major feed into what goes on with the universities. And you can see with the graph on the bottom, those that are native to the SUS, they start in as 18-year-olds and whatever at universities versus those that come in through the vehicle of the Florida college system. Critical pieces as we discuss collaboratively and plan strategically about how the system needs to be stronger and more refined and more efficient for the consumer to produce a larger number of baccalaureates that are focused. I'd close the last one. There's two things that haunt me. One is the business leader that tells me, are you preparing my third grader correctly? The other one is the business leader that I got to know from Lockheed Martin, and his first question when I met him was, what are you doing to produce more math majors in the state of Florida? Our company needs them. And so when we get off on the career paths, I love psychology majors and I love all these other folks, but when you talk about the STEM industry and what's required, the transfer from our business to Frank's business to our children's business has got to be focused on the kind of economy, the kind of lives that these people deserve and need to have a shot at. So that's my piece. I hope I did the proper introductions. And Frank, you're on.
Thank you, Commissioner. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I do want to say quickly, thanks to David for being with us. I've known Dave for a lot of years and knew he'd give us a very good overview of what's going on nationally. I want to thank both Susans with the Council of 100 for helping to orchestrate our meeting here today. And that includes, by the way, the work of the Florida Chamber. I think it's fair to say that Mark Wilson and the good people of the Florida Chamber really are on these issues and are strong partners with the Council in these activities. Also, very much want to say a special thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, to the staff of each of our respective boards. As is always the case, they did the lion's share of the work to prepare all of us for being here today, but get very little of the credit. They're scattered throughout the audience. Many of them didn't even get to come because we don't have any travel money, so they're watching us on the internet. But at the very least, a very special and well-placed thank you to all who helped to create and orchestrate what we're enjoying here today. And last but certainly not least, I saved them for special reason, Scripps has been incredible to work with in all of this, not just in the ethereal sense and the philosophical gathering that brings us together, how important education is to workforce development and job opportunity, but the logistics that bring us here today. Trying to get all of you at one table is, and will be, Judy, a college course before it's all over. It was a remarkable piece of logistical engineering that enabled that to happen, and they've just been great hosts before and under, but they understand the importance of what we're talking about here today. I only have several slides, and I wanted to say, Commissioner, that the allusion to preparing a third grader for the world, I'm not sure if the world is going to be prepared for my 5-year-old. That's a different problem. But like your friend in business, most of us understand how personal this becomes at the end of the day. It isn't just about job creation and turning out people with degrees and overseeing and orchestrating large delivery systems. It is very personal at the end of the day. Parents do need to feel as though, whether their child is in a pre-kindergarten class or a college classroom, that they're getting everything that they need and want to believe that they're supposed to get to be able to navigate the world of the 21st century. The stakes are really higher than I think we all consider. I regularly say that about Scripps and Max Planck and Burnham and Torrey Pines. Sure, it's about economic opportunities, but more important than that, it's about cure and treatment for diseases and increasing quality of life. And we always need to remind ourselves of those priorities at the end of the day. The slides I want to show you, ladies and gentlemen, really are to give you some kind of a visual idea of the incredible opportunity that Florida is providing at all levels of education. We need to ground ourselves in that, because while there's always going to be challenges and hurdles to be crossed, we need to start, I think, by framing this with what opportunities we currently see around the state of Florida. And I've chosen to do that with a set of slides, that one building on the next. The first one just shows you the 11 state universities, their branch campuses, and their instructional sites. As most of you know, it is the 4th largest public state university system in America, with well over now 300,000 students. We award, as you can see, over 51,000 bachelor's degrees, 15,000 master's, and almost 4,000 doctoral degrees in 208, 209. Our research and development this past year surpassed $1.4 billion, and we do have dozens of Florida startup businesses that have been launched, and that's an ever-increasing part of the importance of university research and development. My board members are probably tired of me saying, because I say it so often, that indeed, as we come out of this recession, we really do have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reframe Florida's entire economy, build on agriculture, build on tourism, but change out the third leg of the economic development stool, change it from growth, and not just look for the day when 1,000 people a day are going to come back to our state and build our economy, but change that leg out and infuse in its place the creation of a knowledge-based economy, which means what this man does and what that man does and what I do and what our boards do becomes even more important than it has been in the past. But we've got a unique, perhaps once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do that. Some will suggest the throes of a recession is bad timing. I suggest, and many do, this is the perfect time to make this decision and to make a choice that North Carolina made 50 years ago, to reframe their entire economy by creating a knowledge-based economy. And while perhaps it's not a perfect model, it's a great model to use as we reframe Florida's economy. So this shows you basically how the 11 state universities are geographically and appropriately scattered around the state of Florida, and not only on main campuses but partner campuses, providing some wonderful baccalaureate degree, graduate degree, and postgraduate degree opportunities around the state of Florida. We do that, by the way, partnering, and this is not a cliche, it's fact, with our business community, with our Florida college system, our friends in the private and independent college system, our pre-K-12 partners, and local governments. Next slide will show you a little addition to that. This is the state university system and the Florida college system, which has been evolving over the last several years. When the Pappas report came out, and for those who perhaps have not heard that phraseology, that was a report summoned by the Board of Governors several years ago. One of the recommendations, and it was a good one, was to look at our current rolling stock of state universities and recognize that we are mathematically incapable of producing all of the post-secondary degrees this state is going to need. That many of our universities are now over or at capacity, and with the remaining capacity we have, it is almost impossible to mathematically marry that with the need that continues to grow in a state of 19 million people with a growing economic portfolio. So rather than look at building our house on just the additional universities from blank sheets of paper that are incredibly costly and literally take years, my friends at Florida Gulf Coast University would tell you that, to get up and running and operational, we don't have that kind of time. And so we, I think, in our wisdom looked, and the Pappas report called for it years ago, the creation of additional opportunities with some of our current post-secondary structure by seeing some of our community colleges morph to college status, state college status, and begin to offer baccalaureate degrees in various areas of the state. And so what you see there are the additional campuses that are now in the world of post-secondary education beyond community college that also include community colleges, our colleges, and our state colleges that are offering four-year degrees around the state of Florida. The next slide will show you both SUS and Florida College System, as well as private providers scattered around the state of Florida. You can see how crowded this map is becoming, and to some that might seem a problem of mammoth proportion. If you start from the premise that the crowding denotes opportunity, educational opportunity, geographically located and educationally appropriate, what we've got here is a mounting body of educational opportunity. The next slide. This shows you, again, the addition of distance education sites and opportunities. As we all know, again, the Pappas report laid it out as an opportunity and a challenge to continue to increase distance learning capabilities of all of our delivery systems to assure that everyone, everywhere, especially based on the compromised position people find themselves in with lifestyles and job loads and economics, can still have access to a higher educational opportunity. Again, the map becomes more crowded, but again, I think continues to show you visually the opportunities that we've created in the state of Florida today.